What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Sugi JRPG here, and today I'm gonna be reviewing Clair Obscur Expedition 33 for PC. Now, there has been a lot of hype around this game, everybody's talking about it, but this is not gonna be like those other reviews. I want to give you more objective look into this game, cutting through all the noise and the narratives that people are trying to push. And yes, this is likely gonna be one of those bit more longer reviews than usual. Now let's start off by going into a bit of the premise before we start talking about the other stuff. So the game follows the group known as the Expedition 33, which is a group of volunteers from the island of Lumière. This is where all the humans live, and they are on this mission to stop the Paintress, which is this mysterious entity in the distance who is annually causing people above certain age to vanish in an event known as Gommage. Each year, the Paintress paints a number on a monolith, and all the individuals older than number basically disappear from the world, and the number basically decreases annually, intensifying the urgency to end this cycle. And that's why the humans are basically sending each year these expeditions to basically stop the Paintress so people can actually live longer lives. Now that we have all of that esoteric stuff out of the way, let's talk about the actual gameplay of Clair Obscur, which is definitely taking a lot of influence from our favorite JRPG games like Final Fantasy and others, and this is something that the main developer has stated multiple times in interviews, that he is really loving the JRPG genre, and you can definitely see that. Like the combat feels very dynamic and fast. It's very reminiscent of like Persona 5, and that's probably where he got the idea for the shooting mechanism, for example. But there's a lot of things in the Clair Obscur which are unique and new. So they are bringing these two features like parrying and dodging, which have two other variations which you also unlock later down the game. So basically all the attacks almost inside the game can be dodged or parried. Dodging is easier, parrying needs a bit more time, and if you actually do, I think, 3 parries in a row, you can actually do a counter attack. So basically, you can not only neglect the damage done by the enemies, but also dish out some damage back. And this makes it a very skill-based game, so yes, strategy also matters in these fights, but if you're mechanically very gifted, you can basically stay alive for a very, very long time in this game, just by dodging and like blocking and parrying basically these enemies. And it's a feature that you will need to get a bit used to. Like in the beginning, I was not dodging almost anything, but it gets significantly easier as you play the game. And there's also like opportunity to play on the easiest difficulty, and I think it has like some type of indicators when to dodge and everything like that, or I think it automatically makes you all the dodges. So while I did enjoy this mechanic and it's very refreshing, but in hindsight I kind of felt that it should have been there should have been more abilities from the bosses, especially, which are unable to fully block in this game, because in theory you could like beat the hardest bosses inside this game as level 1. It would take very long time, but since basically you're able to dodge almost everything inside the game, yeah, it's technically possible. The other familiar elements that you're going to be seeing in the game is going to be a skill tree, which is unique to all 6 playable characters in the game. They have all their own different abilities. Some are focused more on AoE, some are a bit of a mixed bag, some of them are like better maybe as a tank, and some people like penetrate to damage more. There's a bit of like differences between these characters, and all of them have also like their own unique type of mechanic which makes these characters distinctive outside from already the abilities, which are different. And the abilities basically scale with stats, which you obviously get to have more attributes every time you level up. You have basically 3 points which you can assign into health and luck, which gives you more crit and speed and things like that. And it's a pretty good system in terms of the stats. I mean, maybe there's a bit of snowballing in the latter part of the game, but outside from that. Now, a lot of the real power is really locked behind the Pictos system, which is essentially the system that we have in Final Fantasy IX. If you have played Final Fantasy IX, you are going to be very familiar with this thing. So Pictos are basically items that you can equip. Everybody has 3 different slots, and these will give you usually 2 different attributes. It's like crit chance, speed, health, and well, they can be other like defense, for example. And then there's going to be a 1 passive ability, and these passive abilities are like able to do a combo attack, increasing the damage dealt on the first turn, or even broken stuff like allowing you to have 2 turns in a row. I think there's over 150 of these Pictos inside the game. Some of them can be gotten in from just exploring the world and finding them on the ground. Some of them are given from bosses, some are sold by vendors. So there's different ways to basically attain them, and usually on the side bosses you might be finding some really broken ones. But it's a lot of customization, and as you level up, you're able to equip more of them. And then there are these items which basically allow you to have more of these equip points for the Pictos. So that's pretty good. So it's kind of like a bad in the beginning, just like in Final Fantasy, where there's not this like limitation on your choices, but as you progress, there's going to be a lot more freedom and room for experimentation and builds that you want to basically build. One of these things also universally that everybody seems to be in agreement on in this game is the world map, and I 100% agree with them that basically this proves that the idea that world maps can be still done today, and they can be fun, they can be very fun to explore. It did kind of reminiscent of a bit of those old Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 times when you would go in the world map, try to find certain locations, and when you could go into them and all that stuff, and that is really fun. And it doesn't need to be this like very open world map where there's really nothing usually there. That's like the most case of these, well, modern open world games. So this world map thing was a success. Everybody agrees with me. The world map also has its own map. There's a lot of side dungeons and a bit of like small locations, and there's vendors and things like that in the world map. It's interactive and it's good and it's beautiful. It's just very well designed, and as you progress throughout the game, you're going to be getting more means of travel, which you're able to traverse the world a bit more in a faster speed and in different ways. And in obviously the developers didn't want to have an actual map inside the dungeons. This is something that they said that, hey, this would break the immersion of exploration, which is a statement I do disagree with, as there's other JRPG titles which have, like in Star Ocean, for example, the maps update as you go to those areas. So, or in some games like Dark Souls and Elden Ring, you can acquire the maps from somewhere, and I think that's kind of like the more better way of exploration. Sometimes you would kind of get lost in some of these zones, or you would miss on certain secret boss in that dungeon because, well, the world or level design wasn't clear enough that there was another path or something like that. But the maps and the dungeons are not like just some pipelines. There's actually like, they're not open world, but there's like few different paths you can go for, and I think there's like very good sense of exploration there. But I don't think that would have been going down if they had added the maps. Just my 2 cents. And obviously have to mention that the level design in this game is superb. The world looks creative and distinctively unique most of the time. And while it's fun that you can jump around and sprint in the game, so you have all these like modern treatments that we see in like Final Fantasy 16 or 7, for example, but there are these certain cliffs in these certain zones where you're not able to jump down, even though there's a platform below, and you can traverse there by going these like light ropes basically, which can go move you up and down. But in certain areas where there's no light ropes, you can actually jump down them. So there's not a level design consistency here where you can jump off a cliff and then you can't jump off a cliff on this part of the map and that part of the map. So that's something I didn't like. I feel like that could have been done a bit more better. There's obviously also some platforming maps, which are kind of like a fun mini games, and some of that is fun too, but sometimes I feel like the character maybe wasn't the most responsive. It could have been, maybe it also like my control is actually a bit broken, but in a sense, like the level design is really good in this game, but I feel like they could have done a bit more better on that platforming stuff, to be honest. And while the level designs are great, and so are the bosses and the monsters, I do feel that the main cast are a bit underwhelming. They seem to look that they were made from the same mold. The 3 main female characters, Maelle, Sciel, and Luna, are all hourglass-shaped girls with flat chest and ass, and all the male characters basically have a messy hair and beard. So like, it seems like all the characters are following a certain similar mold archetype. I'm not saying that, oh, we have to have like plus-sized people in, but you can make characters look actually different. I'm not saying, and all of them seem to have also tattoos. I'm not sure Maelle did have tattoos, but like maybe that was also a bit of a reach. Like I think the characters have to distinctly look different, and there are different ways to do that. And everybody's obviously using the same attire because they are part of the expedition, so everybody basically almost has the same clothing at the same time, and that doesn't help. So if you would actually put all the cast outside from Monaco into a wall and make them black silhouettes, you're not really able to distinguish them from each other because their silhouettes are not very unique to each other. So that's something that I think is very different when you like put out like some Final Fantasy cast from, I don't know, 7, 8, 9. You can definitely tell which character is which. And it's important, in my opinion, that yes, they want a realistic proportion and everything, but you know, I mean, at least with Gustave they tried to have like a mechanical arm, but maybe they could have tried actually a bit more to make the characters look different. When it comes to the performance of the game, it's pretty good. No big FPS drops, but there are many things I kind of dislike though. For example, the hairs of the characters move too much, and in such a motion that you feel like they are partially underwater or something. Like they move in like a kind of unnatural way. It doesn't look like super realistic. Like yeah, it shows that the hair is moving, but like it doesn't feel like mega realistic in my opinion. Like in terms of contrasted to a wind animation or something like that. I don't think it's like the most best way executed way. And obviously this is a very hard thing to achieve. So I understand the difficulty behind it, but then again, like maybe just have some character could have been bald, or they are maybe wearing a hat or helmet, or maybe they are alien, so you don't need to animate and worry about that stuff. There's many ways to go loop around that. And also, there was a couple of crashes on the game, so 4 to 5 crashes probably throughout my playthrough, and this sometimes really bugs out the saves, as there's no manual saving in the game, so you have like auto saves, and sometimes when you try to load the latest save, it might be corrupted, so you actually have to go few saves back, and most of the time when it did crash, it was also a couple of other previous auto saves which didn't allow me to load them. So this was one of the problems. And also it needs to be understood that when you start New Game Plus, it will override your earlier game, which definitely sucks and is a real bad design. So definitely whoever was charged of the saving system is taking a major L right now. And maybe they can do some type of update in the future that you can have multiple save files here. It would be really awesome, as I wouldn't have to do the New Game Plus with losing all of my progress and content and dungeons that I've completed on my previous save. And another point of critique in terms of gameplay is the menu system. It doesn't feel very fluid or fast. It feels a bit laggy actually. And I think the categories are done kind of like a bad order. Everything is put into the character's own menu instead of like being in a drop-down menu in the main screen, which would have been my choice. So I think this was kind of like a more amateur like of a design in terms of the menus. That could have been definitely better. I would have rearranged that a lot more. And obviously, I think menus kind of have to be fast. Now, let's briefly talk about the music and sound. And it kind of goes off without saying that this OST is a banger. It's not just the French tracks. There's a lot of different genres blended in, like the EDM stuff. I mean, France is the home of Daft Punk and Kate Ryan, after all. And I mean, it just has its own sound. It's not trying to copy what they're doing on JRPG games and making a very Japanese style of OST. This is very French in its sound, but in some ways also like it's very unique in terms of like as a game and also as a French production. So I think it's very distinctive in its like musical style compared to any other game or a French artist, let's say. So I think the OST is definitely one of the biggest highlights of this game, and I have no doubt it will be winning the soundtrack of the year at the Game Awards. The other great thing here, obviously, is the voice cast. We got Ben Starr, Charlie Cox, and Jennifer English, who are all great. There's also a French dub available, which didn't seem that impressive based on a couple of clips that I saw. And it's not like many people are going to be playing it on French, maybe the French people themselves, but hey, the English one is pretty good. Now let's get into the actual meat and potatoes here, which is the story, the thing that I love to talk about the most. And this time around, there's going to be a lot of heavy spoilers here. So in case you don't want to get spoiled, well, maybe skip to the last segment on this video and come back later after you completed the game. Now, I'm not going to be talking about too much about the characters here, as so much of the spoilers and the story is truly revolving around our main cast. So, the game's writers decided to break down the story into 3 acts. There's also a brief prologue and epilogue as well. In my opinion, the story starts out really strong. The aforementioned premise about the Paintress and the Gommage is a pretty unique idea. I mean, yes, there has been TV shows about post-apocalyptic worlds where adults are dying or are totally dead, but Clair Obscur has a very different fantasy take on it, which is definitely unique and hasn't been done before. And the prologue and the first act are the strongest points of writing for this game. The characters are thrown into this unknown world. Throughout the expedition, there are a lot of mysteries to unravel, the world to see. It's totally like they don't really know much about it. They know that the Paintress exists and they have to go there and defeat it, and they don't really know how to like even navigate. Like, they have very limited information. And yes, the shit hits the fan really quick in Act 1. It's like straight to action almost. It's great. Then, Act 2 starts right after a big plot twist, maybe one of the most important events in the whole game. And from this point onwards, the world and the mysteries kind of become a lot more clear. Like, a lot of the things that you had questions about, like, most of those are answered right now. And instead of, like, focusing on the expedition and the world building and the Paintress, it starts to spiral more into this family drama. And you can clearly see that it was women writing this part of the story, as women are more interested in people and men are interested in ideas and things like cars and planes and trains and other artistic stuff. So it definitely, like, the first part is a lot more about the premise and the world, and the second act definitely takes a big focus on this family drama. And then lastly we have Act 3, which is very short. There's this massive big reveal which fundamentally shapes our understanding of everything about the world. And in my opinion, the Act 3 and the epilogue are probably the very low points of the story, especially the epilogue. Act 3 is okay-ish, but maybe there's some more open questions which I will address in a second. Like, when you think about it, the whole story really revolves around 9 people only. Like, 9 people, that's it. Like, which is crazy in hindsight, like, how humans really are pivotal to the story and are actually there present, because, like, a lot of these monsters that are going to be beating the world, they're not talking. They don't have lore. They're not, like, significant side bosses which are built out throughout the story. It's not that long a game, obviously, to maybe do that. I mean, it could have been done, definitely, but they didn't do that. And I think, like, a lot of feels about the story and your general enjoyment will revolve around whatever you're going to be caring about these characters or not. Personally, I found most of them kind of bland and uninteresting, but I do like characters like Monoko, who is probably the best written character and in the story, given the fact that he actually joins kind of late to the party. And yes, some minor characters like Eski is a great character too. But like the main cast, like, yes, they had good banter, a dialogue, all that stuff, but that's not necessarily making their character arcs interesting or their themselves like that interesting. Like, some of them don't even have like that pivotal moment or importance in the grandiose story. They have their own side stories which you can explore through side missions, and some of them are actually kind of satisfying. There's good lore actually wrapped up in the side missions, which is surprising. That's not usually done, but actually that makes it worthwhile to do that side stuff. Now, there are some minor plot holes here in the writing, and writing mistakes which don't make kind of sense to me, like why Maelle didn't bring a certain someone back in start of Act 3, why exactly the Paintress is writing numbers in this way particular. I mean, I don't think that's like properly explored the actual reasoning why she's doing that. And then like things like, why didn't the guest trolls go to Lumière to trade? What exactly was stopping them from doing that? And they also introduced this group known as the Writers. We're not talking about the game writers, we're talking about the indie game. There's this group known as the Writers, which seem to be pretty integral to some of the major events that took place before the story begins especially. But they're not mentioned again, and to be fair, they could be maybe in the DLC that has been kind of discussed, or perhaps in a sequel game, which would kind of like, okay, then it will be fine. But if there's not going to be any plans on that, then this whole Writers thing is totally like nonsensical and didn't need to be there, because It just like opened up more questions. Now, basically, the game is going to be ending on you choosing from 2 different endings. I'm not totally against from having multiple endings. Sometimes it works. But both of them are kind of sad and bittersweet. Personally, I'm not a very big fan of them. I'm not going to be saying which ones. Maelle's ending was not the one that I liked. So the other one was better. The one who should not be named. And if you're going to be going for this multiple ending route, at least one of the endings should be happy. Like, because the whole story from start to finish already had a lot of tragedy, a lot of deaths, a lot of sadness, like a lot of bad stuff going on. Like, can we have at least decent, semi-good ending? And also I felt like the endings, the way that they were written, don't really allow that much forms of continuation of the story. So if they want to do a sequel, they would probably have to throw some M. Night Shyamalan shit there, or completely create a new ending to make it work. So they would have to erase the current endings and maybe write something else. Unless they get really, really creative here, and it would probably create another set of plot holes, which would not be good. So, and as also like a final note, I think there's so many gamers out there who don't consume like other storytelling media, like movies, TV shows, books, audiobooks, or whatever. And a lot of people seem to equate good, classy dialogue with British actors as a good story. Just because there's banter, jokes, or great voice acting performances, that doesn't mean that this story is fucking amazing and 10 out of 10 product. I mean, I'm quietly like very disappointed at the ending of the story. So as I said, Act 1, great, maybe 10 out of 10 writing on Act 1. And then it's just a nosedive from there. It's just like, I'm not really interested in this family drama, and the family drama drags long and long and long, more than it basically should. It is like unnecessarily long, and I don't think a lot of that thing, there's like a lot of filler in there in my opinion. So my final note is this: even though I gave a lot of critique in this review, I still think it's a pretty great game. A lot of people are going to be saying Game of the Year or 10 out of 10. Well, personally I'm not quite there, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I really think the story took significant dip in quality after Act 1, and it became less interesting after that. There were a lot of these technical imperfections which we talked about, like the saving system, the crashes, the menus, and the lacking of the maps, and I felt like it really was missing this consistent minigame akin to Tetramaster or Blitzball, which would have made the gameplay loop feel less redundant on the combat side, which I really got burned out on when I made it to Act 3. At that point, I was like so done with the side content. I didn't want to do the dungeons. I just wanted to finish the game and be done with it, and that's how I really feel about the combat. And this is not even that long of a game. Main story is 30 hours, and the completion is like 60 hours. So in my opinion, like, that minigame was definitely missing, and maybe some of those side minigames which you could do on the side maybe should have been integrated in the main story to keep the gameplay loop refreshing, which kind of was maybe one of the issues that I had with it. But all things said, it's an excellent game, especially for the price point it's being sold at, and you can buy it from this location here on the screen and maybe support the channel on the same time. And I'm kind of ranking this thing at like 8.5 to 8.8 out of 10. I don't really think it deserves the 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, as there were these fundamental flaws in the story and some of the designs and the bugs that we talked about here on this video. But thanks for watching. I will be seeing you in the next video when it will be dropping out. Cheers.